Today I'm going to bring up a topic that I haven't talked about in a long time, and that is the comparison of stains to dyes. Now, a lot of people don't know about wood dyes, and today that's exactly what I'm going to talk about. Not long ago, I made this project, and I mentioned during the video that I used dyes to color the wood. And of course, that generated a number of comments, many emails, and a lot of contact questions on what is dyeing. And that's what's prompted this video. So let's get deep into it. When it comes to coloring wood, there are basically two ways in woodworking that we do that. Now, you can use tea and coffee and all sorts of different products, but if you want to have some control over what you're doing and some selection, we typically use dyes or stains. Now, stains are easily the most popular, and they've been around for years and years. Dyes are not nearly as popular, but they've been around for a long time too. Now, I'm going to start off with dye or stains today and show you exactly what it is and why I switched to using dyes only probably 25 years ago. So let's have a quick look at that. Okay, let's start off by having a quick look at stains. Now, most people don't realize that stains, they're all earthen colors, and basically stains are derived from pulverized dirt or rock. They grind it up to a very fine dust, a very fine powder, and they mix that with a variety of solvents and oils, and that's what makes a stain. And that's why they only typically come in earthen colors, because the earth is a variety of different shades of browns, and that's why stains are a perfect match for grinding up dirt. Now, the other reason that we know that is if you have some stain that's been sitting around for a while, guess what? This is why they tell you that you need to stir it thoroughly before you use it, because you need to mix up that compound, that rock product, that pulverized powder, in order to get the right coloration. Now, I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to be using this stain today. But I wanted to show you what that looks like. One of my favorites is this one. This is a gel stain, and it has a higher concentration of earth products in it. And you can see that's what a gel stain looks like at the bottom. It's literally a glump of rock down there, and that's why you need to stir it so thoroughly. And they will even tell you to stir it while you're using it. So don't just stir it and then use it. You need to, while you're using it, you need to, if you're having a bigger project, you want to keep stirring it as you're adding more stain to your project. Now, what that means is when we have a stain product, and this is one of the things that's driven me away from using stains, as well as they work for indoor projects that I'm making. When I'm putting that stain on a wood, what's happening is when I mix that stain, stir it up thoroughly, and this one I've already stirred it, but I can see I can tell by the top of it, it's already unmixing. When I mix that and put that onto the wood, typically we let that sit for a few minutes, and then we wipe it off after it's sort of partially dry, and wipe it against. Some people will say wipe it against the grain. Some will tell you to wipe it with the grain. Either way, we're going to wipe some of that stain off. And as we're doing that, basically what we're doing is we're driving some of the dirt into the grain of the wood, which isn't a problem, except that the coloration stays there. But what happens is it affects the sort of the brilliance of the grain. It starts to actually cover, because it's dirt, it starts covering the grain. And for certain things that I'll show you later on, that can affect that. So when you're using stains, typically you want to realize, once you realize that the stains typically lay on top of the wood, they will soak into a certain degree, but they typically lay on top. We call a stain as something that lays on top. Now, if you're building a fence, using this to make fences, stains are perfect. In fact, we don't even wipe them off. We just paint them on a fence, and that's because the rock component, the dust, the dirt that makes the coloration, it lays right on the fence, and it's a perfect UV inhibitor. So your fence will last longer when you stain it, because the dirt, the powdered dirt that sticks to the wood, stops the UV from breaking down the wood. So for outdoor projects, stain is perfect. For indoor projects, depending on the kind of wood that you're using, they may tend to block some of the features of that wood, and we're going to get to that in a minute here. Now we're going to move over to dyes, and dyes basically come either as a liquid or they can come as a powder. And depending on the dye that you purchase, most of them will mix with water, and I only mix them with water, but you apparently can mix them with a solvent or an oil, and sometimes you can even mix them right directly into a finishing product that you might be using. But I always mix them separately in water, and this is my stock selection of aniline dyes. And what I particularly like about them, if there isn't a color that I want, I can actually take some of these and mix my own, and whenever I mix a dye, I make my own colors because I know what I'm looking for, and then I label it and date it so that I know how old it is and exactly what it is. And that way I never have a mistake, because it's always the way, I always mix them the way I want. Now, aniline dyes are made differently, and depending on what they are, they're made through different processes, which I'm not going to get into right now, but they are not pulverized dirt. And what we know about dyes is when we apply a dye, and I'm going to show you more of this later on, when we apply a dye to wood, it actually soaks into the wood. It's like an oil finish compared to polyurethane finish that lies on top. So dyes soak right into the wood. And I'm going to put, just to try and mix some colors here that are similar. So this is a stain that I'm putting here, and you can see the rock chunks there as I break them up in there, and I'm going to move this around a bit. I think I have some matching colors here, but I'm not positive, so we'll see if that is or not. And I'm going to take that now and just kind of wipe that. That's pretty red. And now I'm going to take one of my concentrates here, this one here. No, it's that one there. And I think this is the closest I could get to a match. And this is one that I've made up myself. No, it's not as red. But this is water, and you can see how it's soaking into the wood. As you apply this to the wood, it's basically soaking right in. There's no wiping off. What's nice with an aniline dye is once that's dry, you can come back and put another, if you don't like that color and you want a little bit darker, you can come back and put another layer on that. And I've put up to 3 layers to make something darker and darker, because each time it's soaking into the wood. Now, the reasons that I like aniline dyes is this is water, and this is going to be dry in probably less than an hour, so I can actually put a surface coat on that, my first surface coat on that, in an hour from now, whereas this is an oil, and that's going to take at least overnight before I would be comfortable putting any kind of a top finish on that. So this is much quicker to use, and it's soaked its way into the wood. What I like about this is you can also do some bits of blending. If you've got an area that's too light in some area, you can blend it a little bit darker in a specific area. And just like any they both react to the same depending on the grain of the wood, and you can see a glue mark in there. That's another reason why I pre-finish everything, so that we don't get things like that glue mark in there. That's glue that has prevented either a dye or a stain from penetrating the wood there. So that's another little tip there. So now I want to talk very briefly about highly figured woods. And those are woods like, for example, bird's eye maple or tiger wood, where it has the stripes in it, curly maple or curly wood. There's all sorts of different colorations or grain patterns in wood. And that grain pattern almost has a three-dimensional look to it. They call it a chatoyance. And that chatoyance is derived from the way the grain comes from different angles, and it often will culminate in one area. And depending on how you look at that wood, it almost looks like it's three-dimensional, because when you move it or when you move in relation to it, the wood seems to move. It seems to have an embodiment in it. Now, what creates that is light striking the wood. And there's two kinds of lights, and this is why it's very difficult to show on film, because there is something called specular light, and that is light on a bright sunny day with no clouds. That is what you will get from a single light bulb or the sun on a straight, beautiful sunny day. On a cloudy day, of course, we get a diffuse light, and that's what we get from, like my ceiling lights in here, from tubes, and even this to a degree is a frosted bulb, so it's a little bit diffuse, but it's still a single source. So that can affect how wood looks. So when you're looking at wood and you're in the wood store, depending on what the lighting is that they have, you may have to work kind of hard to see how that figure works in there. But when you get home, because you might have a single light source or two light sources, it's very different. And the way you can tell the difference is by the shadow. If you have a specular light, you will have a very sharp, defined shadow. If you have diffuse light, you'll have maybe more than one shadows, which is what I have now, and it's not very defined. It's not very sharp and clear. That's a diffuse light, and that can affect the look of wood. So when you are testing wood, and I encourage you to do that, you'll need to be aware of the kind of light that you're working with. Now let's look at some figured maple. So here's a piece of that bird's eye maple that I used in that little table. And if you look down in here, you can see the difference. I did get a little bit of light here where you can actually see the difference in that. And this is a perfect piece of wood for that, because this shows you when you get stain that has ground up pulverized dirt in it, once you get that into the grain, it blocks the reflection of that light back, and that's what blocks the chatoyance of some figured woods. Okay, the last sort of example I want to show you of the difference between dyes and stains. On this side, I'm applying some stain, and I've mixed this very well. I'm just putting it on with a stir stick here, because I don't want to take the time to clean out a brush just for this. And on the other side, I'm going to put a dye, and because I'm putting this on glass, it's going to tend to want to bead up a little bit, but I'm going to put it on fairly thick so that it's about an equal coverage. Now, when we look through underneath here, I have some bird's eye maple, and when I move that back and forth, if you look into the dye, you can see the movement of that bird's eye maple underneath. But on this one, it's very hard or impossible to see any movement underneath, and that's because the earthen product here, it blocks. It's a very good blocker, and it's tending to block any sort of translucency, whereas the dye has quite a bit of translucency. And that's the difference between dyes and stains. Well, that concludes my video for today. The difference between stains and dyes, and neither one of them are right or wrong. They're just different projects. You might need one or the other depending on what it is you're doing, particularly if you're using any kind of special grains or any kind of figured wood. You may want to lean towards a dye. Now, stains, of course, they're available literally everywhere. Dyes are a little bit harder to find, so I will put a list in the article on Woodwork Web. You'll be able to go there and check out maybe this is something that you want to do a little bit of experimenting with. They're fairly inexpensive, and there's a good wide range of projects or products that you can get, different colors, and of course you can easily mix them together if you're using a water as a base for them. So just some more options on woodworking to help you get better results in the future. I'm Colin Kennett for Woodwork Web. Thanks for watching.